In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This is a religion game. The mountain that emerges out of all darkness and chaos resembles Axis Mundi. In astronomical terms, it is the axis of rotation for the celestial bodies. In religious studies, it is also known as the cosmic axis, center of the world, or world tree. Even, it has been greatly extended to refer to any mythological concept representing the connection between the higher and lower realms. The mountain sits at the center of the universe and brings order. It establishes a system that stands out from its environment. Its boundary is marked by the circular atmosphere surrounding the floating mountain, and it creates a separate space out of the background void of the cosmos. As the mountain utters its first thoughts, it is apparent that the mountain is a conscious organic entity, more than just a living space or a dynamic ecosystem. The conscious mountain projects its will onto every tree, bird, rock, every type of weather, every time of the day, and rotates as it wishes. It is a dominant being that resides on a higher level than the other mundane objects. Transcending its physical form, the mountain exists in hyperspace of thoughts, constituting a Zen philosophy where all world condenses into a single moment. The mountain, in this way, is not only a passage to the godly realm, but is actually the god. Or even more, the game mountain becomes a religion itself. Players worship the game. They convert to the mountain religion, puts an unimaginable amount of time, and pursues a journey of sadhana in the game space of mountain. From a more academic perspective, the game mountain does create a symbol system that has a goal of creating values and does engage in deep play of the players. And in a way, it is enough to be justified as a religion. However, all the things that I've just said in this video only make sense when I, as an individual player and critic of the game mountain, choose to argue so. In another player's perspective, this could be utter bullshit. Many complain that it is only a waste of money to buy the game, some commented that it's merely a screensaver, and others question if it can actually be considered as a game. Let's see what the designer David O'Reilly says about his own game. Mountain is a natural simulation game for desktop and iOS. It uses drawings to generate a unique mountain and surrounding ecosystem floating in space. There are no advertised controls or objectives. Cosmic events occur over long stretches of time, hours, months, and years. Every mountain performs its simulation differently. Therefore, it can be clearly said that this game can be categorized as a natural simulation game, or a mountain simulation. The basic game mechanics involve rotating, zooming in and out, interacting with falling objects, playing music, seeing the mountain's thoughts, and etc. Focusing on the mechanics of mountain, my actual argument is that the game mountain is a meta-critique of games in that its core mechanics is not in the form of physical gameplay, but in the process where the players associate elements within the game to meanings outside the game. From the perspective of how to analyze a game, Mountain conveys a very strong anti-proceduralism implication. Proceduralism emphasizes that game already has meaning before it is being played. The players explore the meanings embedded in the rules of the game through play. In the proceduralist tradition, play is not central to understanding the meaning created by playing the games, since it is the rules that create those meanings. As Boggess puts it, play refers to the possibility of space created by processes themselves. However, anti-proceduralism claims that the game focuses on the player. Game structures play and is only facilitated by means of rules, but not letting the rules determine the game. Arguing from a more play-centrism stance, anti-proceduralism states that play is an act of appropriation of the game by the players. The gameplay of Mountain is developed in an extremely anti-procedural fashion. The rules and mechanics in Mountain are not only a constraint, but moreover distracts players from the core mechanics of the game. Players have been trained to follow the rules of the game and the need to win or interact with the game. There has always been a necessity to make something happen in the game. The players expect that to happen and strives to make effective impacts that could be reflected on the mountain. But what happens to the mountain when players try every way to make something happen? Nothing, if I might say. What embedded meaning could be inferred from all these rules? I would be reluctant to give an answer. Nothing that the players do actually helps them to accomplish any goals in the game Mountain. They are just fancy effects that do not have any actual impact on the mountain. It will still rotate as always, it will still float as the only existence in this world, and the cycle of nature will only continue. Such attempts from the player only result in insignificant changes to the mountain, and implies the non-mechanics feature of the game. The mechanics that are apparent and seemingly making the game playable do not actually matter. And here we reach a semi-conclusion that the game mechanics of Mountain are not intended to be played. Then we come to a question. What does it mean that a game is not for the purpose of play, and all the mechanics in the game seem to be meaningless? Here we observe a mirror structure between the game and the player. It is exactly because the lack of actual mechanics or controls in the game that the player's actions are not mediated by the game rules, but are maximized through the non-mechanics of Mountain. If you wish to rotate it, you do. If you wish to zoom out or zoom in, you will be fulfilled. If you wish to play music, the mountain will still be there despite however you choose to play the keyboard. Within the extreme finite mechanics that the player could interact with the game exactly mirrors the act of the player without interfering the process. Delving into the core that define game mechanics, it boils down to how players interact with the game. In the game Mountain, this is simplified into the most purified form of interaction in that it does not reflect the will of the game but the player. Thus, the displacement of the game mechanics is not on the games but on the player. It is when the player interacts with the gameplay that the gameplay generates meaning. The game only becomes a game when the player chooses to view it as a game. Just like my first claim that the mountain is a religion, the meaning is created only because I, as an interpreter of the game, choose to associate it in that way. Therefore, whatever mechanics that the designer puts within the game that seem to be playable or interactable is not actually the point of the game. What really matters is what the players make of the game, and that constitutes its actual game mechanics. The game Mountain is therefore a manifestation of the relation between the player and the game. The ontology of the player is realized through the freedom of interpretation. Mountain is therefore not a game about game, but actually about the player. The player ultimately becomes the real game. The existence of this game is significant because it deconstructs the binary between game and non-game. Just like how Duchamp's Fountain provokes the audience to reconsider the definition of art, Mountain asks everyone to reconsider the boundary of game. In an established system of video games surrounded by the vast environment of non-video game, Mountain stands on the binary of the system and relates both to the internal system and the outside environment. Aggressively introducing this controversial work of self-reference to the system, it aims at elevating the complexity of the game system to another level. The intrusion of Mountain breaks the original video game paradigm and intrigues thoughts upon the traditional binary code of video games. As the player becomes the game itself, all the meaning association, meaning critique, debate between players or players worshipping this game as religion becomes part of the game mechanics. Debate between players on whether the game is actually meaningful or not in the end creates a new layer of meaning for the game and even for the entire gaming industry. Such critical interactivity between the player and the game, between the player and the player, is outside the physical elements of the game but transcends to a philosophical critique. Thus, I reached the conclusion that the game Mountain is a meta-critique of games because its core mechanics is not in the forms of physical gameplay, but in the process where the players choose to associate the elements within the game to meanings outside of the game. Therefore, it is actually a game about the players.